I'm Diane Harper, 62 years old, married to Tom for 12 years. When his mother Marlene taught my stepdaughter to call me the B word, I thought that was the worst betrayal possible. But when I accidentally discovered what she was really planning, those curse words became the least of my problems. 6-year-old Ellie called me the B word at our Sunday dinner. She screamed it in front of Tom's sister, our pastor, everyone who mattered. Tom just laughed it off. Kids pick up everything these days. But I saw Marlene winking at Ellie, encouraging her, rewarding her for the performance. Where did you learn that word, sweetheart? Grandma Marlene taught me. She said that's what we call mean stepmoms who make too many rules. I was devastated, couldn't sleep that night, so I went downstairs to clean, trying to work off my anger and hurt. While organizing Tom's messy desk drawer, my hand hit something wedged in the back. A thick envelope with my name on it. Inside were Medicare bills for doctor visits I'd never made, my signature on documents I'd never signed, a $47,000 home equity loan I knew nothing about. My heart stopped. This wasn't just a grandmother being spiteful. This was systematic identity theft. Marlene was stealing my medical records, forging my name, and draining our assets while teaching Ellie to make me look like an unstable, angry woman. She wanted everyone to think I was losing my mind so no one would believe me when I discovered her crimes. But Marlene underestimated one thing. I may be 62, but I'm not going down without a fight. If you're hearing this story, tell me in the comments. Where in the world are you listening from? Before we begin today's story, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. Now let's get started. The kitchen clock read 3:15. Diane Harper sat at her wooden table, smoothing a Social Security letter with her palm. The paper felt cold, important. The numbers at the bottom made her stomach twist. 62 years old, 1 more month until benefits kicked in. She'd counted these days like a countdown to safety. The refrigerator hummed behind her. Ice cubes shifted in the freezer with a gentle crack. Diane opened her pill organizer. Monday's compartments were empty. She'd already taken her blood pressure medication. Just 1 more month, she whispered. The back door opened with its familiar squeak. Tom stepped in, bringing cold October air and the smell of motor oil. His work shirt had grease stains near the pocket. At 66, he still fixed cars at Peterson's Auto 3 days a week. Hey, Dee. He kissed her forehead. His lips were warm against her skin. Tom glanced at the letter. Benefits paperwork? Final notice. They approved everything. Diane folded the letter once, then twice. We'll be okay. Course we will. Tom poured coffee from the pot she'd made an hour ago. The mug clinked against the counter. But Diane's hands still shook slightly. Money had been tight since Tom's hours got cut. The house payment wasn't huge, but groceries cost more every month. Her part-time job at the library barely covered utilities. Tom's mother would arrive soon. Marlene always came on Tuesdays. As if summoned by the thought, gravel crunched in the driveway. Diane heard a car door slam. Then another. Marlene swept through the front door without knocking. She carried a bright blue tote bag and wore that smile too wide, too sweet. Like syrup that never quite tasted right. I brought cookies, Marlene announced. The bag rustled as she set it down. 6-year-old Ellie ran behind her, braids bouncing. Tom's daughter from his first marriage spent Tuesday nights with Grandma Marlene. It gave Diane and Tom couple time, though they mostly watched television. Diane, honey, you look tired. Marlene's voice carried concern that felt practiced. I'll keep Ellie overnight. You need rest. Diane heard the unspoken words. You need rest because you're getting old. Because you can't handle a child anymore. Ellie ran straight to Marlene's arms, then turned to face Diane. Her small face looked serious. Important. Mom's lazy, Ellie announced. The words hit like ice water. Diane froze with a dish towel in her hands. The fabric felt damp and heavy. Marlene laughed. A bright, encouraging sound. She held out her palm for a high five. Ellie slapped it like she'd won a prize. Ellie. Diane crouched to the child's eye level. We don't talk like that. Why not? Ellie's head tilted. She glanced toward Marlene like checking a script. Kids tell the truth, Marlene said. Her shrug seemed innocent. Maybe she sees something we don't. Diane's chest tightened. She's 6 years old enough to notice things. Marlene's smile never wavered. Tom waved his hand dismissively. Coffee sloshed in his mug. "Ma's just joking around, right, Ellie? Grandma taught me to say it." Ellie's voice carried pride. The kitchen went quiet except for the refrigerator's hum. Diane felt heat rise to her cheeks. Not anger yet. Shock first, then shame. "Marlene." Diane kept her voice steady. "Don't coach her to hurt people." "Coach?" Marlene's eyebrows raised in fake surprise. "I'm teaching her honesty." Tom stepped between them. "Let's not make a big deal out of nothing." "Nothing." Diane wanted to scream that word back at him. Instead, she turned toward the sink. Dirty dishes waited in gray water. She plunged her hands into the coolness. Marlene moved around the kitchen like she owned it. Opening cabinets. Rearranging items on the counter. "Where do you keep the good glasses?" "Top shelf." Diane's voice came out smaller than intended. "Tom, help your mother." Marlene didn't ask. She commanded. Tom reached for the glasses without question. Diane watched his automatic obedience. Marriage used to feel like partnership. Now it felt like she was outnumbered 2-1. Ellie climbed onto a chair and swung her legs. "Grandma says lazy people don't deserve cookies." Diane's hands stilled in the dishwater. Soap bubbles popped against her wrists. "That's enough," Diane said. "I'm just repeating what I heard." Ellie's voice carried innocence that sounded rehearsed. Marlene touched Ellie's shoulder gently. "We don't want to hurt feelings, do we?" But Diane saw the wink. Quick as lightning. "Just for Ellie." The wink felt like a slap. "I think it's time for Ellie's overnight," Diane said. Her voice shook despite her efforts. Perfect timing. Marlene gathered her tote bag. "Come on, sweetheart. Grandma has special activities planned." Ellie hugged Tom enthusiastically. She waved at Diane from across the kitchen. "No hug. No kiss goodbye. Be good for Grandma," Tom called as they headed for the door. Diane dried her hands on the dish towel. The fabric felt rough against her palms. "Tom, we need to talk about what just happened." Ellie's 6. "Kids say stupid things." Marlene coached her to say that. Tom's jaw tightened. "Mom loves that kid. She's not trying to hurt anyone." Then why did she wink at Ellie after telling her to stop? "You're reading too much into things." Tom's voice carried exhaustion. Like Diane's feelings were work he didn't want to do. The front door slammed. Car doors slammed. Gravel crunched as Marlene's sedan pulled away. Diane stood alone in her kitchen. The overhead light flickered once. Even the house seemed uncertain. That evening, Diane opened Tom's desk drawer looking for stamps. His phone lay face down beside a stack of unopened mail. She didn't touch the phone. But the mail caught her attention. One envelope bore Medicare's logo. Thick paper. Official looking. Diane's fingertips tingled as she lifted it. Why was Medicare sending mail to Tom? His benefits were years away. The envelope wasn't sealed. Inside, she found a form requesting medical records. For a cognitive assessment. With her name printed at the top. Her hands went cold. She hadn't requested any assessment. Hadn't scheduled any appointment. But someone had used her information. Diane set the form back where she found it. Her movements felt careful, deliberate, like she was handling evidence. Through the window, the street looked empty. Too quiet for how crowded her chest felt with worry. "Tomorrow," she whispered. "Tomorrow I'll ask him directly." But deep in her stomach, dread was already taking root. Like a seed planted in dark soil. Waiting to grow into something she wouldn't want to see. The clock ticked toward bedtime. Diane turned off the kitchen light and walked upstairs. Behind her, the Medicare form waited in the darkness. Some seeds grow whether you water them or not. Wednesday morning arrived gray and cold. Diane sat at the kitchen table with her coffee growing lukewarm. Steam rose from the mug in thin wisps that disappeared before reaching the ceiling. The Medicare envelope lay open beside her breakfast plate. She'd read the cognitive assessment request 3 times. Each reading made her stomach tighten further. The form listed a clinic she'd never visited. Dr. Patricia Hawkins, Geriatric Mental Health Services. Someone had scheduled an appointment using Diane's Medicare number and personal information. "Tom." She called toward the living room where he watched morning news. "Can you come here?" His footsteps shuffled across the hardwood floor. Tom appeared in his bathrobe and slippers, hair still messy from sleep. Diane held up the form. "Did you take me somewhere I don't remember?" Tom barely glanced at the paper. His eyes stayed focused on the television screen visible through the doorway. Probably a billing error. A billing error with my exact Medicare number? Systems make mistakes. He shrugged and reached for the coffee pot. I wouldn't worry about it. Diane watched his face carefully. No surprise. No curiosity. Just dismissal. Tom, look at this. She spread the form flat on the table. Someone scheduled a mental health evaluation. Using my information. You're making this bigger than it needs to be. The phone rang. Tom answered it quickly, too quickly. Hi, Ma. His voice brightened immediately. Yeah, she's fine. Just worrying about paperwork. Diane's chest tightened. Ma. Marlene was calling already, and it wasn't even 8 o'clock. Ellie's excited for another sleepover, Tom continued. This weekend? Sure, that works. Another overnight. Diane hadn't agreed to another overnight. Tom hung up and turned back to his coffee. Ma wants to take Ellie to the zoo Saturday. I thought we were all going together. She likes one-on-one time with her grandmother. Diane watched Tom's reflection in the kitchen window. He avoided her eyes even in the glass. That afternoon, Ellie came home from school with dirt on her knees and a scowl on her face. She dropped her backpack by the door with a loud thump. Grandma called me, Ellie announced. Called you where? At school. The office lady let me talk to her. Diane's hands stilled on the dish she was washing. What did Grandma say? She said you're sad because you're getting old. And old people say mean things when they're sad. Each word felt like a small stone thrown at Diane's chest. I haven't said anything mean to you. Ellie shrugged. Grandma says I might not remember right. Because you confuse me. Diane dried her hands slowly. The dish towel felt rough against her palms. Ellie, do you think I confuse you? I don't know. Ellie's voice carried uncertainty that sounded genuine. Maybe, the doubt in that small voice broke something inside Diane's chest? After dinner, Diane drove to Marlene's condo complex. The evening air was sharp and cold. Her breath made small clouds as she walked from the car to Marlene's door. Marlene answered wearing a silk blouse and perfectly applied lipstick. Like she'd been expecting company. Diane, what a surprise. The smile reached her eyes, but not in a warm way. Come in. The living room smelled like lavender air freshener and something else. Something medicinal. We need to talk about Ellie. Diane remained standing near the door. Of course. Sit down. Can I make tea? No thank you. Diane's voice came out stronger than she felt. Stop telling Ellie that I'm confused. Stop coaching her to say hurtful things. Marlene's smile widened. Oh, honey. Kids learn words everywhere. Better from family than strangers. You're teaching her to disrespect me. I'm teaching her to be honest about what she sees. Marlene moved closer and patted Diane's forearm. Light. Dismissive. Don't be controlling. Diane pulled her arm back. The air between them turned sharp and cold. Marlene, I'm asking you to stop. And I'm telling you that children need to speak their minds. Marlene's voice carried gentle authority. Maybe if you listened to what she's trying to tell you, you'd learn something. Diane felt heat rise to her cheeks. Not embarrassment, anger. She's 6 years old enough to see when adults are struggling. The word, struggling, hung in the air like smoke. Diane left without saying goodbye. Friday morning brought another surprise. Diane stopped at Peterson's pharmacy to pick up her blood pressure medication. The clerk, a young woman with tired eyes, scanned Diane's prescription card. That'll be $47.50. 47? Diane opened her wallet slowly. It's usually $12. The clerk checked her computer screen. Your insurance plan shows a change. Higher copay tier. I didn't change my plan. According to our records, someone called Wednesday to update your coverage options. Diane's hands went cold. Who called? I don't have those details. You'd need to contact your insurance company directly. Diane paid the $47. The bills in her wallet felt thinner as she handed them over. In the pharmacy parking lot, she sat in her car and called Medicare. The hold music played for 18 minutes. When a representative finally answered, Diane had to verify her identity 3 times. Ma'am, I show a recent inquiry about supplemental coverage options. I didn't make any inquiry. The call came from a family member. Listed as an authorized agent. I never authorized anyone to speak for me. According to our records, you signed a healthcare power of attorney form last month. Diane's chest tightened. I never signed anything. I'll transfer you to our fraud department. More hold music. More waiting. The fraud specialist took Diane's information and opened a case file. We'll investigate and contact you within 10 business days. 10 business days felt like forever. That evening, Tom checked the mailbox before Diane could reach it. He flipped through envelopes quickly, sliding one into his jacket pocket. Anything important? Diane asked. Just bills. Tom's answer came too fast. Diane watched him walk toward the house. His shoulders looked tense. Guilty. After Tom fell asleep, Diane crept downstairs and checked his jacket pocket. Empty. Whatever mail he'd hidden was somewhere else now. She opened the desk drawer where she'd found the Medicare form. New papers had appeared. A bank statement for an account she'd never opened. A credit check authorization form with her forged signature. Diane's hands shook as she photographed each document with her phone. The flash seemed too bright in the dark room. Outside, wind rattled the windows. The house creaked and settled around her like it was trying to tell her something. Diane climbed back upstairs and slid into bed beside her sleeping husband. Tom's breathing was deep and even. Peaceful. But Diane lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling and wondering how many other documents carried her name without her knowledge. In the morning, she would start keeping her own records. In the morning, she would start building her own paper trail. Because if someone was trying to erase her from her own life, she needed proof that she still existed. Sunday arrived with pale sunshine and the smell of rain in the air. Diane stood at the kitchen counter, hands deep in ground beef, mixing ingredients for her famous meatloaf. The meat was cold and smooth against her palms. Tom had invited his sister Rachel and her husband Jim for dinner. Family time, he'd called it. But Marlene had invited herself when she heard about the gathering. I'll come early to help, Marlene had announced on the phone. Not asked. Announced. The front door opened at 2 o'clock sharp. Marlene swept in carrying grocery bags and wearing an apron over her Sunday dress. She'd brought her own ingredients without asking what Diane was cooking. I thought I'd make my special casserole, Marlene said, unpacking dishes from her bags. Everyone loves it more than. She gestured vaguely toward Diane's meatloaf. Diane's hands stilled in the mixing bowl. I already started dinner. We can have both. Marlene's voice carried false brightness. More options for everyone. But she was already taking over the stove, moving Diane's pots to make room for her own, acting like the kitchen belonged to her. Ellie arrived with Tom from their afternoon walk. Her cheeks were pink from cold air, and she wore the new coat Marlene had bought her. Bright red with gold buttons. Grandma. Ellie ran straight to Marlene's arms. Hello, sweetheart. Marlene hugged Ellie close, then whispered something in her ear. Her hand cupped around her mouth to block the words from Diane. Ellie's eyes brightened. She nodded seriously, like receiving important instructions. Diane felt her stomach tighten. What are you two planning? Girl secrets, Marlene said with a laugh. Nothing for grown-ups to worry about. Rachel and Jim arrived at 4:30. Rachel carried a bottle of wine and wore her nursing scrubs from her hospital shift. Her husband Jim worked construction and spoke in a slow, careful way that made everyone listen. Smells good in here, Rachel said, hugging Diane. What can I help with? Everything's under control, Marlene answered before Diane could speak. Why don't you sit down and relax? Diane watched Rachel's eyebrows raise slightly. Rachel had known Marlene for 30 years. She recognized the territorial behavior. They gathered around the dining room table at 5 o'clock. Marlene had somehow arranged the seating so Diane sat at the far end, away from most of the conversation. Like a guest in her own home. The table looked beautiful. Marlene's casserole steamed in the center, surrounded by side dishes and fresh rolls. Diane's meatloaf sat to one side, already looking forgotten. Everything looks wonderful, Jim said, reaching for serving spoons. Marlene outdid herself, Tom added, spooning casserole onto his plate. Diane served herself meatloaf and green beans. The food tasted fine, but her appetite had disappeared. Ellie sat between Marlene and Tom, swinging her legs under the table. She picked at her food and kept glancing toward Marlene like waiting for a signal. Ellie, eat your vegetables, Diane said gently. Ellie looked up with serious eyes. You're stupid, and you don't get to tell me anything. The words hit like cold water thrown in Diane's face. Rachel's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Jim set down his water glass with a soft clink. Tom's face flushed red. Ellie. Diane's voice cracked on the child's name. Marlene leaned forward with theatrical concern. Ellie, we don't use words like that. But as she spoke, she winked at Ellie. Quick and encouraging. Only Diane was positioned to see the wink clearly. I'm sorry, Ellie said to the table generally. But her voice carried no real regret. She's tired, Tom said quickly. Kids say things they don't mean. Do they? Rachel's voice was carefully neutral. Her nurse's eyes moved between Ellie and Marlene, reading the dynamic. Diane felt her face burning. Ellie, why did you say that? Because. Ellie glanced toward Marlene for help. Because children sometimes express frustration in clumsy ways, Marlene supplied smoothly. Maybe she's picking up on tension in the house. The accusation hung in the air like cigarette smoke. What tension? Diane asked. Well, you have been quite emotional lately. Marlene's voice carried gentle concern that felt like a knife wrapped in silk. Forgetful, touchy about little things. Jim cleared his throat uncomfortably. Rachel set down her fork entirely. I haven't been forgetful, Diane said. Oh, honey. Marlene reached across the table to pat Diane's hand. Last week you asked Tom the same question 3 times. About the grocery list. Diane pulled her hand back. That never happened. See? You don't even remember not remembering. Tom shifted in his seat. Let's not make a big deal of this. But Rachel was watching everything with sharp attention. Her nursing background made her good at spotting manipulation tactics. Diane excused herself and walked to the kitchen. She needed air, space, distance from Marlene's poisonous concern. Behind her, she heard Marlene's voice continue in stage whispers. She's been having these episodes. Getting confused about appointments. Tom's worried sick. Diane gripped the kitchen counter. The granite was cold and solid under her hands. Episodes. Confused. Worried sick. Each word was a lie wrapped around a grain of truth. Twisted just enough to sound believable. She returned to the dining room carrying dessert plates. Marlene was covering a sheet of paper on the table with a dish towel as Diane approached. What's under that? Diane asked. Recipes, Marlene said quickly. Too quickly. But Diane had glimpsed the letterhead before the towel covered it. Sunset Manor Assisted Living. The air in the room went thick and still. Why do you have assisted living brochures? Diane's voice came out steadier than she felt. I picked them up for a friend, Marlene replied. Her mother needs placement. Rachel leaned forward. What friend? No one you know. But Rachel's expression said she didn't believe a word of it. After dessert, while Tom and Jim discussed football scores, Diane helped Rachel clear dishes in the kitchen. Rachel moved efficiently, stacking plates with practiced ease. Diane, Rachel said quietly, how long has Marlene been teaching Ellie to talk back to you? Diane's hand stilled on a serving bowl. You noticed, I'm a nurse? I know coaching when I see it. Rachel's voice carried professional authority. And I know manipulation. Tom thinks I'm overreacting. Tom thinks avoiding conflict will make problems disappear. Rachel dried a glass with sharp movements. He's done it his whole life. They worked in silence for a moment, water running and dishes clinking. That assisted living brochure wasn't for any friend, Rachel said finally. Diane's chest tightened. I know. Be careful, Diane. My mother tried this same routine with my first husband's mom. Started with little comments about forgetfulness. Ended with guardianship papers. The plate in Diane's hands felt slippery. Guardianship? Legal control over someone's finances and medical decisions. Based on claims of mental incompetence. Diane set the plate down carefully. Can she do that, if she builds enough documentation? Doctor visits. Incident reports. Testimony from family members about concerning behavior. The Medicare form. The mysterious appointments. The coached insults from Ellie. Pieces clicked together in Diane's mind like a lock opening. After everyone left, Tom cornered Diane by the refrigerator. His jaw was tight, his eyes angry. Why did you embarrass Mom tonight? Diane stared at him. I embarrassed her? Questioning her about the brochures? Making a scene over nothing. She had assisted living information with my name on it. You don't know that. I saw the paperwork before she covered it. Tom exhaled like he was tired of her feelings. You're making everything bigger than it is. Diane looked at her husband of 12 years. Really looked at him. His face carried irritation, not concern. Frustration with her, not worry about her well-being. Tom, your mother is trying to have me declared incompetent. That's ridiculous, is it? She's coaching Ellie to disrespect me. She's making appointments using my Medicare number. She's telling people I'm forgetful and confused. Maybe because you have been forgetful and confused. The words hit like a physical blow. Diane felt something cold settle in her chest. Something that might have been the death of trust. I haven't been confused about anything, she said quietly. Then why can't you remember the grocery list conversation? Because it never happened. Tom shook his head like she was proving his point. Diane realized she was standing alone in her own kitchen, in her own house, arguing for her own sanity with her own husband. And losing. That night, she lay beside Tom in their shared bed and listened to him breathe. Deep, even, peaceful breathing. Like a man with a clear conscience. But Diane stared at the ceiling until dawn, understanding finally that the war for her life had begun. And she was surrounded by enemies who looked like family. Midnight found Diane sitting alone in her dark kitchen. The only light came from the green numbers on the stove clock, 12:47 a.m. The house was quiet except for the refrigerator's steady hum and Tom's snoring drifting from upstairs. She'd spread documents across the kitchen table like evidence at a crime scene. Medicare forms, bank statements, pharmacy receipts, Social Security correspondence. Each piece of paper told part of a story she was finally beginning to understand. The laptop screen glowed pale blue in the darkness. Diane had been staring at her Social Security account for 20 minutes, watching numbers that didn't make sense. Her monthly benefit amount showed $1,847. But last month's statement had shown $1,923. $76 less, and she had no idea why. A note at the bottom of the screen made her stomach turn. Representative payee review initiated 10:15. Status pending. Representative payee. Someone else controlling her money. Diane's fingers trembled as she clicked for more details. The request had been submitted by Thomas Harper, authorized family member. Filed with supporting documentation about cognitive decline and financial management concerns. I didn't authorize anything, she whispered to the empty kitchen. But there it was, in official government type. A request to have her declared financially incompetent. Diane closed the laptop and opened the desk drawer where Tom kept important papers. Her Medicare card wasn't in her wallet where she always kept it. She'd noticed that yesterday but told herself she'd misplaced it. Now she searched methodically, behind Tom's insurance papers, under a stack of his bank statements, between pages of his retirement fund documents. She found her Medicare card tucked inside an envelope addressed to Tom. The edges were worn like it had been handled frequently. Her hands shook as she pulled out her phone and turned on the flashlight. The bright beam cut through the darkness, illuminating other envelopes she hadn't noticed before. Bills addressed to her but opened by someone else. Medical correspondence she'd never seen. Insurance forms with her signature that she'd never signed. The signature looked almost right. Almost like hers, but the D in Diane was too round, and the H in Harper leaned the wrong way. Someone had been practicing writing her name. Footsteps creaked overhead. Tom was getting up for the bathroom. Diane quickly stuffed papers back into the drawer and closed the laptop. She sat in darkness, listening to water run through pipes in the walls. When Tom's footsteps returned to the bedroom, Diane finally breathed normally again. "What are you doing to me?" she whispered to the silence. But the silence didn't answer back. Tuesday morning arrived gray and cold. Tom left for work at 7:30, kissing Diane's cheek like nothing had changed. His lips felt dry against her skin. Diane waited until his truck pulled out of the driveway. Then she called Social Security. The hold music played for 32 minutes. When a representative finally answered, Diane had to verify her identity 4 different ways. "Ma'am, I show a recent request for representative payee status. Filed by your spouse with supporting medical documentation." "What kind of medical documentation?" "Doctor's notes indicating memory problems and financial confusion." "A cognitive assessment showing concerning decline." Diane's vision blurred. "I never had a cognitive assessment. According to our records, you were evaluated by Dr. Patricia Hawkins on October 12th. She filed a detailed report about your mental state. I was never in that office. I've never met any drive. Hawkins. The representative's voice grew carefully neutral. Are you saying someone used your identity fraudulently? I'm saying I think my family is trying to steal my benefits. I'll transfer you to our fraud investigation unit. More hold music, more waiting, more time for panic to build in her chest. The fraud investigator took detailed notes and opened a case file. But they warned her, if medical professionals have documented cognitive decline, the representative payee request may still be approved pending further evaluation. Diane hung up feeling like she was drowning in bureaucracy. That afternoon, a certified letter arrived, hand-delivered by a postal worker who required Diane's signature. Inside, she found official notice from the bank. Her checking account would be frozen pending resolution of conflicting authorization claims. Someone had attempted to add a secondary account holder using power of attorney documents. Diane drove to First National Bank immediately. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles went white. The branch manager, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes, reviewed Diane's account behind closed doors. Mrs. Harper, we received power of attorney paperwork last week. Your husband submitted documents giving him access to your accounts. I never signed any power of attorney. The manager slid papers across the desk. Diane's signature appeared at the bottom of legal documents she'd never seen before. But again, the signature was wrong. Too careful, too perfect, like someone had traced it. This isn't my signature. The manager leaned forward, studying the documents more closely. It does look different from your other signature cards on file. Can you freeze everything until this gets sorted out? We've already done that. But Mrs. Harper, if those power of attorney documents are legitimate, freezing your accounts could be seen as obstruction. Diane felt the walls closing in. What if they're not legitimate? Then we're looking at identity theft and fraud. Very serious charges. In the bank parking lot, Diane sat in her car and called Rachel. Her sister-in-law answered on the second ring. Diane? What's wrong, Rachel? I need help. I think Tom and Marlene are trying to have me declared incompetent. Silence on the other end of the line. Rachel, I'm here. Just processing. Can you meet me somewhere? Not at your house. They met at a coffee shop on Market Street. Rachel arrived in her nursing scrubs, hair pulled back in a ponytail, looking tired from a 12-hour shift. Diane spread her documents across the small table. Bank papers, Medicare forms, Social Security correspondence, the forged power of attorney. Rachel studied everything with professional attention to detail. This is bad, Diane. Really bad. How bad? They're building a legal case that you're mentally incompetent. If they succeed, they can control everything. Your money, your medical decisions, where you live. Can they really do that? I've seen it happen. Elder abuse disguised as family concern. Rachel's voice carried bitter experience. The system is designed to protect vulnerable seniors. But sometimes it protects them from the wrong people. What do I do? Fight back. Document everything. Get your own medical evaluation to prove your competence. Find a lawyer. Tom will say I'm being paranoid. Tom is part of the problem. Rachel's eyes were steady and serious. Diane, my brother chose sides. And he didn't choose yours. That evening, Diane found a notice taped to their front door. Final warning, in red letters across the top. A mortgage company she'd never heard of claimed they owed $47,000 on a home equity loan. With 30 days to pay or face foreclosure proceedings. Diane stared at the notice until the words blurred. They'd owned their house free and clear for 8 years. Tom had burned the mortgage papers in the backyard fire pit to celebrate. But someone had taken a loan against their home's value. Someone with power of attorney access. When Tom came home from work, Diane met him at the door with the foreclosure notice. What is this? Tom's face went pale. Then angry. Where did you get that? It was taped to our front door. You weren't supposed to see that. The words hit like ice water. You knew about this? It's temporary. Just paperwork stuff. Ma needed some help with her medical bills. You took a loan against our house without telling me? You signed the papers? I never signed anything. Tom pulled the power of attorney documents from his jacket pocket. The same forged signature. The same too perfect handwriting. You signed it last month. You just don't remember. Diane looked at her husband's face. Really looked. She saw determination there. Preparation. This wasn't confusion or fear. This was a plan being executed. Tom, that's not my signature. Doctor says memory problems can affect handwriting too. What doctor? I haven't seen any doctor. Dr. Hawkins, the specialist Ma found. You were there 2 weeks ago. I was never in any doctor's office. Tom's jaw tightened. This is exactly what she warned us about. You're getting paranoid, combative, classic signs of dementia. The word dementia hit like a physical blow. Diane felt something break inside her chest. Not her heart, something deeper. Her faith in the man she'd trusted with her life. You're lying to me. I'm trying to help you. By stealing my money? By forging my signature? By taking loans I never approved? By making sure you're taken care of when you can't take care of yourself? Diane stared at Tom, and she saw a stranger looking back. Someone who'd decided she was already gone. Someone who'd started dividing up her life like she was already dead. That night, she lay beside him in their bed, listening to his peaceful breathing. Tom slept like a man with a clear conscience. But Diane understood finally that she was fighting for more than her money. She was fighting for her existence. Because if they could make everyone believe she was confused, forgetful, paranoid, and incompetent, then who would believe her when she screamed for help? She was disappearing one document at a time. One forged signature at a time. One concerned comment about her mental state at a time. And the people doing it to her looked exactly like her family. At 3 a.m., Diane got out of bed and walked to the kitchen. She opened a notebook and began writing. Her own words, her own handwriting, her own version of events. If she was going to fight back, she needed her own paper trail. The war for her life was just beginning. First learned to wear a smile. Diane sat in the quiet afternoon kitchen, pale sunlight slanting through the window. In her hands, she held a photograph from 5 years ago. Tom's father's funeral. The whole family gathered in black clothes, arms around each other, grief shared and real. She remembered that day clearly. How Marlene had cried in this very kitchen afterward, mascara streaking down her cheeks. I don't want to be alone, Marlene had whispered. Steam from Diane's tea kettle fogged the window. Harold was my whole world. I don't know how to live without him. Diane had made tea with careful hands. Earl Grey with honey, the way Marlene liked it. She'd sat beside Tom's mother and held her shaking fingers. You're not alone, Diane had promised. We're family. Family. The word felt different now. Heavier. Sharp around the edges. Diane set the photograph down and opened an old folder from Tom's desk. Inside, she found refinance papers from 3 years ago. She remembered signing them, trusting Tom's explanation. It'll simplify things, Tom had said. Lower interest rate. Better payment terms. Marlene had stood behind his shoulder then, reading over his arm. A helpful mother-in-law, making sure her son made good financial decisions. Just sign where he points, Marlene had suggested kindly. Men understand money better than we do. Diane had laughed at the joke and signed her name 12 times. Initials here, full signature there, so many pages of fine print that her eyes had crossed. Now she read every word carefully. Page 14 contained language she'd never noticed, power of attorney limited financial authority. Granted to Thomas Harper for account management and emergency decision-making. Power of attorney, hidden in the middle of mortgage paperwork. Her stomach turned cold. She'd signed away her financial independence 3 years ago without knowing it. How did I miss this? She whispered to the empty kitchen. But she knew how. Trust. Marriage. The assumption that your husband wouldn't trick you into signing away your rights. Ellie's voice interrupted her thoughts. The child had come home from another visit with Marlene, and she was practicing sentences at the kitchen table. Grandma says you forget stuff. That's why Daddy has to help. Diane looked up from the documents. Help with what? Important things. Like money and doctors. Ellie spoke carefully, like reciting a lesson. Grandma says forgetting is normal when you get old. I'm not old, sweetheart. 62 is old. Ellie's voice carried certainty that didn't sound like her own. Grandma showed me on the calendar. That's really, really old. Each word felt like a small knife. Not because they came from Ellie, but because Ellie had been taught to use them. Who told you 62 is old, Grandma? She said people your age need help remembering things. Diane watched Ellie's face. The child looked proud of her knowledge. Like she was sharing important information that adults had trusted her with. Did Grandma ask you to tell me that? Ellie's eyes shifted toward the window. She said you might ask that question. What else did she say? That I should tell the truth about what I see. What do you see? You being sad and confused. And Ellie's voice dropped to a whisper. Scary sometimes. The word scary hit like ice water. I'm scary when you ask too many questions. Grandma says asking too many questions means you're worried about things you can't remember. Diane felt her chest tighten. Marlene had turned her natural curiosity into evidence of mental decline. Questions became symptoms. Concern became confusion. Ellie, do I seem scary to you right now? Number? Ellie's voice carried genuine uncertainty. But Grandma says people can seem normal and still be sick inside their heads. Sick inside their heads. A 6-year-old child shouldn't know that phrase. That evening, Diane called Rachel from the bedroom while Tom watched television downstairs. Rachel, I need to ask you something about Marlene. Go ahead. You mentioned she did this before. To your first husband's family. Silence on the other end of the line. Rachel, she did it to my mother-in-law. Started with comments about forgetfulness. Escalated to doctor visits Sarah never made. Ended with Marlene having financial power of attorney. What happened to Sarah? She died in a nursing home 6 months later. Marlene controlled everything. Sarah's house, her savings, even her funeral arrangements. Diane's hand tightened on the phone. Was Sarah actually sick? Sarah was grieving her husband's death. She was sad and lonely, not incompetent. But Marlene convinced everyone that depression was dementia. Did anyone try to stop it? My ex-husband trusted his mother. Just like Tom trusts his. Rachel's voice carried old pain. Men want to believe their mothers are helpful, not predatory. How long did it take, from first comment to complete control? About 8 months. Diane calculated in her head. Marlene's comments about her forgetfulness had started in spring. The Medicare appointments began in summer. The power of attorney was signed in fall. 8 months. She was running out of time. That weekend, Diane watched Marlene interact with Ellie during a supervised visit. She stayed in the same room, pretending to fold laundry. Marlene knelt beside Ellie, speaking softly. Remember what we practiced? Ellie nodded seriously. Good. Now, if someone asks who taught you those words, what do you say? Nobody taught me. I just noticed things myself. That's right. Very smart girl. Marlene handed Ellie a small piece of candy. Reward for the correct answer. Diane felt sick watching the manipulation. A child being trained to lie. Being rewarded for deception. Ellie, Diane called. Come help me with laundry. In a minute, Ellie called back. Now, please. Ellie looked toward Marlene for permission. Marlene nodded slightly. The permission-seeking gesture broke Diane's heart. Ellie was learning to check with Marlene before responding to Diane. Learning to see Marlene as the real authority. As Diane folded towels, she heard Marlene whisper, "See how she gives orders? That's what angry people do." Is she angry at me? Ellie whispered back. Angry people are usually angry at everyone. Especially people they can't control. Control. Marlene was teaching Ellie that Diane's parenting was about control, not care. That night, Diane opened her pill organizer to take her evening medication. The Tuesday compartment was empty, but she was certain she'd filled it that morning. She counted the remaining pills in the bottle. 2 missing. Marlene had been in the kitchen that afternoon, making tea. Alone for maybe 3 minutes while Diane used the bathroom. 3 minutes was enough time to remove pills from a weekly organizer. Diane thought about those missing pills. Blood pressure medication that could cause dizziness if skipped. Symptoms that might look like confusion or weakness. They're not just stealing my money, she realized. They're making me sick. The realization hit like cold water. This wasn't just financial abuse. It was physical manipulation designed to create the very symptoms they were claiming to treat. Diane locked her pill organizer in the bedroom dresser that night. Tomorrow, she would start keeping her medications somewhere Marlene couldn't reach them. But lying in bed, listening to Tom's peaceful breathing, Diane understood that the real poison wasn't in missing pills. The real poison was the slow, careful destruction of everyone's faith in her competence. One comment at a time. One forged signature at a time. One trained child at a time. Marlene wasn't just stealing Diane's money. She was stealing Diane's reality. making everyone believe that Diane's version of events couldn't be trusted. And the most terrifying part was how well it was working. Even Diane was starting to doubt herself. Monday morning arrived crisp and bright. Diane stood at her kitchen counter making coffee, movements deliberate and calm. When Marlene arrived for her usual Tuesday has become Monday visit, Diane was ready. "Good morning, Marlene." Diane's voice carried new authority. "Visits are supervised from now on." Marlene paused in the doorway, still holding her bright tote bag. Her smile faltered for just a moment before snapping back into place. "Supervised? By whom?" "By me. In this room. No whispering. No private conversations with Ellie." "Diane, honey, I think you're overreacting to." "I'm not overreacting." Diane poured coffee into one mug. "Not two. I'm setting boundaries." Marlene set her bag down slowly. "Has something upset you?" "Yes." "You coaching my granddaughter to disrespect me. You forging my signature on medical forms. You filing false reports about my mental competence." The words hung in the air like smoke. Marlene's face went through several expressions before settling on concerned confusion. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Dr. Patricia Hawkins. Medicare billing for appointments I never made. Representative payee requests I never authorized." Marlene's eyes flickered, just for a second, but Diane caught it. "Tom must have handled those things without telling you." "Tom didn't handle anything. You did. And I have documentation." Diane pulled a manila folder from the counter. Inside were printed screenshots, photocopied forms, and a timeline she'd created showing the pattern of fraudulent activity. "I called Medicare Fraud Department. I called Social Security. I called the bank." Diane's voice stayed level. "They're investigating all of it." Marlene sank into a kitchen chair. "You're making this much more complicated than it needs to be." "No, you made it complicated. I'm making it simple." The phone rang. Diane answered without checking caller ID. "Mrs. Harper? This is Janet Cole from Medicare Fraud Investigation. We've completed our preliminary review of your case." Diane put the call on speaker. "Go ahead. The medical appointments filed under your Medicare number were fraudulent. Dr. Patricia Hawkins' office has no record of treating you. Someone used your personal information to submit false claims." Marlene's face went pale. "What happens next?" Diane asked. "We're referring this to law enforcement. Identity theft and Medicare fraud are federal crimes." Diane thanked Janet and hung up. The kitchen felt very quiet. "Marlene, who do you think used my Medicare number?" "I have no idea." But Marlene's voice had lost its confident tone. Diane opened another document. "This is a bank statement for the home equity loan someone took against our house. The application lists you as co-borrower." "That's impossible. Your signature is right here." Diane pointed to the bottom of the page. "I had a handwriting expert compare it to your Christmas cards. It's a perfect match." Marlene stood abruptly. "I think I should leave. I think you should stay and explain why you tried to steal my house." The front door opened. Tom's voice called from the hallway. "Ma, everything okay? I saw your car." He appeared in the kitchen doorway, still wearing his work clothes. His face showed confusion, then concern as he read the tension in the room. "What's going on?" Diane handed him the bank documents. "Your mother took a $47,000 loan against our house without my knowledge." Tom scanned the papers. His face went through several changes. "This has to be a mistake. Your mother's signature is on the co-borrower line. My signature was forged." "Ma?" Tom looked at his mother with genuine confusion. "What is this?" Marlene's careful composure cracked. "She's not well, Tommy. I was trying to protect both of you." "By committing fraud? By securing resources for her care? She needs help, and you're too stubborn to see it." Tom stared at his mother. "You told me she signed those papers herself. She would have signed them if she understood what was best for everyone." The admission hung in the air like a confession. Diane felt vindication and heartbreak at the same time. Tom was finally hearing the truth. Rachel arrived an hour later, responding to Diane's text. She brought printed evidence of her own screenshots of Marlene's text messages to Tom about managing the Diane situation and preparing for the inevitable. "Tom, look at these." Rachel spread the phone screenshots across the table. "Mom's been planning this for months." Tom read silently, his face growing darker with each message. One text read, "Doctor appointment went perfectly. Report should justify the payee request. Another, Ellie's cooperation is key. Keep reinforcing the story. A third, house equity gives us flexibility if she resists placement. Placement? Tom's voice cracked. Ma, you were planning to put her in a nursing home? Assisted living, Marlene corrected, as if that made it better. She would have been comfortable. Comfortable and broke, Diane said quietly. Tom set the phone down with shaking hands. How long have you been planning this? Since your father died. I saw how quickly things can go wrong for seniors. I was being proactive. You were being predatory. Marlene's face hardened. I was being practical. She took my son away from me. At least this way, I could make sure you were both provided for. The truth finally emerged. Not concern for Diane's welfare, but resentment about losing influence over Tom. I didn't take your son, Diane said. I married him. Same thing. Rachel pulled out her phone. I'm calling the police. Wait, Tom said. Let me handle this. Handle it how? Rachel's voice carried nurses-level skepticism. She committed multiple felonies. Tom looked at his mother, then at his wife. Ma, you need to fix this. All of it. Return the money. Withdraw the payee request. Stop the assisted living research. And if she won't? Diane asked. Tom met her eyes. Then we prosecute. Marlene laughed bitterly. You'd send your own mother to jail? You'd send my wife to a nursing home to steal her inheritance? The words hit Marlene like a physical blow. I never wanted to hurt anyone. You hurt everyone, Tom replied. You hurt Diane. You hurt Ellie. You hurt me. Marlene gathered her purse with jerky movements. Fine. I'll fix the paperwork. You'll do more than that, Diane said. You'll attend family counseling. You'll follow supervised visit rules. You'll stop coaching Ellie to disrespect me. And if I don't, then you'll lose access to all of us. Marlene's face cycled through anger, disbelief, and finally something that might have been fear. You can't keep me from my granddaughter. I can if you're legally banned from our property for fraud and harassment. The power had shifted completely. Marlene finally understood that her victims weren't helpless anymore. I'll need everything fixed within 30 days, Diane continued. Bank accounts restored. False medical records withdrawn. Social Security paperwork cancelled. 30 days or what? Or Rachel calls the FBI. Marlene left without saying goodbye. Diane watched her car pull away and felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Relief. Tom sat at the kitchen table, head in his hands. I'm sorry, Dee. I should have seen what she was doing. You saw what you wanted to see. I wanted to believe she was helping. Diane poured him coffee. Maybe she thought she was helping. But help doesn't require lies. Can you forgive me? Diane considered the question seriously. I can forgive you for being fooled. But Tom, you chose her version of events over mine. That's going to take time to repair. Tom nodded without arguing. What do we do now? Now we rebuild. Starting with the truth. That evening, Diane created new files for all her important documents. Real signatures, accurate medical records, true financial statements. She kept copies in 3 different locations. The truth wasn't going to disappear again. For the first time in months, Diane felt like herself. Not confused, not incompetent, not a burden, just a woman who'd fought back and won. 2 weeks later, Diane stood in the fellowship hall of Trinity Methodist Church, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Folding chairs scraped against linoleum as families gathered for the monthly community dinner. The smell of casseroles and coffee filled the air. Tom's sister Rachel had organized this gathering. Not just family this time, but people who mattered. Pastor Williams, Tom's boss from the auto shop. Neighbors who'd known them for years. Why so many people? Tom had asked when Rachel explained the plan. Because lies die in sunlight, Rachel had answered. And Marlene thrives in shadows. Marlene arrived precisely at 6 o'clock, wearing her best Sunday dress and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She'd spent the past 2 weeks being alternately apologetic and defensive, trying to rewrite history even as she was forced to undo it. This is unnecessary, she'd told Tom on the phone. Family business should stay in the family. But family business had become community business when Marlene started spreading lies about Diane's mental state to anyone who would listen. Ellie sat between Diane and Tom, wearing a yellow dress and looking confused by all the adult tension. She'd been attending counseling sessions with a child psychologist who specialized in parental alienation cases. Today is about truth, Diane had explained to Ellie that morning. Sometimes adults need witnesses when they tell the truth. Pastor Williams, a man in his 70s with kind eyes and careful words, stood at the front of the room. We're gathered tonight not for dinner alone, but for reconciliation. The Harper family has asked for community support as they work through some difficult issues. Diane had specifically requested that the pastor facilitate this meeting. Marlene wouldn't dare act inappropriate in front of church leadership. Marlene, Pastor Williams said gently, would you like to begin by sharing what you told us earlier? Marlene stood slowly, her hands shaking slightly. 2 weeks of investigation had revealed the full scope of her actions. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. Her voice cracked. I made some mistakes. What kind of mistakes? Tom's boss, Jerry Peterson, spoke up. He'd been hearing rumors about Diane's supposed mental decline affecting Tom's work performance. Marlene looked around the room, seeing faces that expected honesty. I submitted false medical claims using Diane's Medicare number. Murmurs rippled through the room. Pastor Williams raised his hand for quiet. Continue. I forged her signature on financial documents. I tried to have myself appointed as her representative payee for Social Security. Why? This came from Mrs. Chen, their next-door neighbor. She'd been receiving subtle suggestions from Marlene that Diane might be unsafe living alone. Marlene's careful composure began to crack. I was worried about her future. About Tom's future. Worried how? Rachel pressed. She married my son and changed everything. I just wanted to make sure. If something happened to her, that Tom would be okay. Diane stood up. Her voice was clear and steady. Marlene, tell them what you really wanted. I wanted my family taken care of. Your family? Or your control over your family? Marlene's face flushed. You don't understand what it's like to lose influence over your own son. The admission hung in the air like a confession. Not concern for Tom's welfare, but resentment about losing power over him. Pastor Williams leaned forward. Marlene, what specific lies did you tell about Diane's mental state? I may have suggested she was becoming forgetful. To whom? Marlene's eyes darted around the room. To people who asked about her. What people? Bank employees. Medical offices. Her employer at the library. Diane's supervisor, Linda Martinez, was present tonight. Marlene called me 3 times, suggesting Diane might need reduced hours due to cognitive issues. I was trying to help. Were you? Tom's voice carried new hardness. Or were you trying to build a case for incompetency? Marlene broke down then. Not with genuine remorse, but with self-pity. I lost my husband. I was alone. And then she took you away from me too. Diane didn't take me, Tom said quietly. I chose her. That's what marriage is. You used to call me every day before her. I was 34 years old, Ma. It was time to have my own life. Jerry Peterson spoke up. Mrs. Harper, you told me Tom was stressed about his wife's declining memory. You suggested he might need time off for medical appointments. I was trying to prepare people for what might be necessary. Based on lies, Diane said. Based on possibilities, Rachel produced printed documents. These are the text messages you sent Tom over the past 6 months. She read aloud. Diane asked me the same question twice today. Very concerning. Found her staring at the wall for 20 minutes. She left the stove on again. Did any of those things actually happen? Pastor Williams asked. Marlene's silence was answer enough. Tom stared at his mother with growing horror. You made all of that up? I was trying to help you see. You were trying to make me believe my wife was losing her mind. Ellie, who had been quietly listening, suddenly spoke up. Grandma, did you teach me to say mean things? All eyes turned to the 6-year-old. Marlene's face went pale. Did you tell me to call Diane stupid and lazy? Marlene looked around the room of witnesses. Everyone waiting for her answer. Children sometimes misunderstand. Did you tell me to say those things? Ellie's voice carried the simple persistence of childhood. Yes, Marlene whispered finally. Why? The question came from innocence, but it cut deeper than any adult accusation. Because I wanted people to see that she wasn't good for this family. Tom stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. That's enough. Pastor Williams raised his hand. Tom, let her finish. I wanted my son back, Marlene continued, tears streaming now. I wanted things the way they were before she came. Before Diane came, I was lonely, Tom said. She didn't take anything from you. She gave something to me. And what about me? What do I get? You get consequences, Rachel answered. You get to face what you've done. Linda Martinez spoke next. Marlene, because of your phone calls, I nearly put Diane on medical leave. I questioned her competency based on your lies. Bank employees treated me like I was confused, Diane added. Because you called ahead to warn them about my memory problems. Dr. Hawkins filed false reports in the Medicare system. Rachel continued reading from her notes. Based on appointments that never happened, paid for with fraudulent claims. The scope of destruction was overwhelming. Marlene's campaign hadn't just targeted Diane's finances. It had attacked her reputation, her employment, her medical records, and her family relationships. How do we fix this? Tom asked. Pastor Williams looked around the room. Marlene has agreed to several things. She'll provide written retractions to everyone she contacted with false information. She'll participate in counseling. She'll make financial restitution for the fraudulent loan. And if she doesn't follow through, then the legal system takes over, Rachel said simply. Marlene signed the accountability agreement that night, with witnesses present. Her hands shook as she wrote her name, but the signature was genuine this time. Ellie climbed onto Diane's lap during the paperwork signing. Are you mad at Grandma? Ellie whispered. I'm sad that she made bad choices, Diane answered honestly. But I'm glad the truth came out. Can Grandma still visit? Yes. But only when other adults are here to make sure everyone is safe. As people left the fellowship hall, several stopped to apologize to Diane for doubting her. For listening to Marlene's concerns without hearing Diane's side. Tom loaded chairs into the church storage closet while Diane gathered empty casserole dishes. I keep thinking about all the times I didn't believe you, he said. You believed what you were told to believe. I should have believed my wife over my mother. Diane considered this. Maybe, but she's very convincing, and she used love as a weapon. Love? She convinced you that hurting me was helping me? That's the most dangerous kind of manipulation. They drove home in comfortable silence. Ellie fell asleep in her car seat, exhausted by the day's emotional weight. That night, Diane updated her files one more time. Not with evidence of crimes, but with evidence of resolution. Witness statements, signed agreements, a paper trail showing that the truth had finally won. For the first time in months, she locked the files away without fear. The war for her life was over. But the work of rebuilding trust would take much longer. 3 months later, spring arrived with soft rain and the smell of fresh earth. Diane woke to sunlight streaming through clean windows and the sound of birds in the oak tree outside her bedroom. She moved through her morning routine with calm purpose. Coffee first, then her medications from the new locked cabinet Tom had installed. Her pill organizer stayed in the kitchen where only she could access it. At 8:30, Diane walked to the senior center 4 blocks from home. The sidewalk was damp from overnight rain, and her sneakers left light prints on the concrete. The fresh air filled her lungs with possibility. Good morning, Diane, called Martha from behind the front desk. Morning, Martha. Diane hung her jacket on the volunteer coat rack. How many new members this week? 6. And 3 of them specifically asked for you. Diane had been volunteering at the senior center's information desk twice a week since January. She helped newcomers navigate Medicare, Social Security, and elder services. Her own experience with fraud had made her an expert in protecting vulnerable seniors. Mrs. Harper? A woman in her 70s approached the desk, clutching a manila folder. I'm Eleanor Shaw. I think someone is stealing my Social Security checks. Diane gestured to the chair beside her desk. Tell me what's happening. Eleanor's story was familiar. A concerned nephew handling her mail. Lower benefit amounts. Confusion about account access. The same pattern Diane had lived through, but caught earlier. The first thing we need to do, Diane said gently, is document everything. Date and time of each incident. Copies of all paperwork. Your own handwriting on everything you sign. You think I should report my own nephew? I think you should protect yourself first. Family relationships can be repaired. Financial security is harder to rebuild. By noon, Diane had helped Eleanor file preliminary reports with 3 different agencies. The process was becoming routine. Document, report, verify, protect. At home, Diane found Tom in the kitchen making sandwiches for lunch. His movements were careful, attentive. 3 months of marriage counseling had taught them both new habits. How was the senior center? He asked. Productive. Another financial abuse case. Tom winced slightly. Like Ma's situation? Similar pattern. Family member claiming to help while actually stealing. They'd learned to discuss Marlene's actions directly. No euphemisms. No minimizing. The counselor had insisted on clear language. Speaking of Ma, Tom said carefully, she called this morning. Diane set down her purse. About what? She wants to know if she can bring Ellie a birthday gift next week. Ellie's 7th birthday was Wednesday. Marlene's supervised visits had been going well, but gift-giving remained complicated. What did you tell her? That we'd discuss it together and let her know tonight. Diane appreciated the consultation. Tom was learning to make decisions with her instead of for her. Small gift only. Nothing that looks like compensation for good behavior. I'll tell her. Ellie burst through the front door at 3:15, backpack flying and cheeks pink from the school bus ride. Diane, guess what happened today? Diane smiled at the child's enthusiasm. What happened? Mrs. Peterson asked if my grandma was the same Mrs. Harper who helps seniors with money problems. I said yes, and she said you helped her Aunt Eleanor. Eleanor Shaw was one of Ellie's teacher's relatives. Word was spreading through the community about Diane's volunteer work. Did that make you proud? Diane asked. Super proud. I told everyone my grandma catches bad guys who steal from old people. Grandma, not step-grandma, not Tom's wife, just grandma. The title had evolved naturally as their relationship healed. Want to help me make cookies for your birthday party? Diane asked. Can I lick the spoon? Of course. They spent the afternoon in the kitchen, flour dusting the counters and chocolate chips disappearing into small mouths. Diane watched Ellie measure ingredients with serious concentration. Diane, Ellie said, cracking eggs with careful precision, why did other grandma try to make people think you were sick? Other grandma, Ellie's term for Marlene now. A way to distinguish between the grandmother who hurt people and the grandmother who helped them. She was scared, Diane answered honestly. Scared of losing people she loved. But hurting people doesn't make them love you more. No, it doesn't. It makes them not trust you. That's right. Ellie nodded solemnly. I learned that in counseling. The child psychologist had done excellent work helping Ellie understand that adults sometimes made bad choices. And that children weren't responsible for fixing adult problems. That evening, the whole family attended Ellie's school concert. Diane sat between Tom and Rachel in the gymnasium, listening to 32nd graders sing songs about friendship and kindness. Marlene sat 3 rows behind them, alone. Her supervised visits didn't extend to school events yet, but she was allowed to attend public gatherings. During intermission, Marlene approached their row carefully. Diane, she said quietly, Eleanor Shaw is my bridge partner. She told me you helped her report her nephew's fraud. Diane turned around. Yes. She says you saved her house. I helped her save herself. Marlene nodded slowly. I wanted to thank you. For helping her. Despite everything I did. It was the first genuine apology Marlene had offered. Not self-pity or excuse-making, but acknowledgement of harm and gratitude for help. Eleanor deserved protection, Diane answered. Yes, she did. They looked at each other for a moment. Not friendship, but recognition. 2 women who understood how easily trust could be broken and how hard it was to rebuild. After the concert, Diane's family walked home under streetlights, Ellie skipping ahead and singing songs from the performance. The evening air was warm and full of spring promises. Tom reached for Diane's hand as they walked. His fingers were rough from mechanic work, but gentle in their touch. I keep thinking about what you told Eleanor today, he said. About protecting yourself first. What about it? I should have protected you from Ma. Instead, I protected Ma from your concerns. Diane squeezed his fingers. You're protecting both of us now. Am I? You chose truth over comfort. That's the hardest kind of protection. They reached their front porch, where window boxes filled with spring flowers caught the last of the evening light. Diane had planted them in February, after the Medicare fraud case was finally closed. New growth in old spaces. Inside, Diane tucked Ellie into bed with stories about brave children and wise adults. The nighttime routine had become precious to both of them. Diane, Ellie whispered as the lights went out, I'm glad you didn't go away. Go away where? To the place other grandma wanted to send you. Assisted living. Ellie had overheard more than anyone realized. I'm not going anywhere, Diane promised. This is my home. And I'm part of your family? The most important part. Ellie smiled and closed her eyes. Later, Diane sat at her desk updating files. Not evidence of crimes anymore, but records of healing. Thank you notes from seniors she'd helped. Photos from Ellie's school events. Medical reports showing her excellent mental health. A paper trail of a life rebuilt. Tom appeared in the doorway carrying 2 cups of tea. Thought you might want company, he said. They sat together in comfortable quiet, steam rising from their mugs. Outside, rain began falling again, gentle against the windows. I signed up for a communication class, Tom said eventually. What kind of communication? How to have hard conversations without avoiding the truth. Diane smiled. That's a good skill. Should have learned it 30 years ago. You're learning it now. That's what matters. Tom sipped his tea thoughtfully. Do you think we'll be okay? Really okay? Diane considered the question seriously. I think we'll be different. Maybe that's better than okay. Different how? More honest. Less willing to ignore problems hoping they'll disappear. More like equals? Exactly like equals. They finished their tea in the kind of silence that feels like resolution. Not the end of their story, but the end of the chapter where lies had power over truth. Diane locked her files in the desk drawer. Tomorrow, she would help more seniors protect themselves. She would volunteer at Ellie's school field trip. She would have dinner with Rachel to discuss family boundaries. Simple things that felt revolutionary after months of fighting for the right to exist. Life doesn't end just because it breaks once. What falls apart can be the very place where we learn to stand again. If this story gave even a small moment of strength to someone out there, then everything I went through means something today. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe, and share a piece of your own story in the comments below. Your words might become the seed of the next chapter we create together. Thank you for spending this